kids, we owe kids all of it, all that we can give them every day. And if we can't give them all of that, then they need someone else.
You are listening to the Music Ed Mentor Podcast, where we teach music educators how to build, manage, and grow thriving school music programs and have long and happy careers. Are you ready? Welcome to episode 13 of the Music Ed Mentor Podcast. I am your host, Elisa Jones. You can follow my music education blog at professionalmusiceducator.com or find me on Facebook at Professional Music Educator with Elisa Jones. And bonus, coming up in January, if you are at the Colorado Music Educators Association Conference, I will be presenting there as well. Now, this is a very special episode, and I'm very excited to share it with you. Whether you are just getting started in music education, maybe you're just finishing up your degree work to start your first job, or you're thinking about changing jobs, this episode is all for you. And I'm so thrilled to be bringing you the advice from 5 music educator contributors from around the country who have been in the field, who have changed jobs, who have stayed at jobs, and even have chosen to go on to higher ed or retire. Friends, their advice is priceless. They share with us what skills you need to have before becoming a new teacher, how to find a new job, and what you should have on your resume that will clinch that job for you, whether for your first or your last. Haven't you ever wondered what the first steps you need to take at a new job are to ensure success right from the start? And for those of us who have been in the field for some time, we talk about how you might discover if it is time for you to change jobs, retire, quit music education altogether. But first, give yourself the gift of easier assessments in 2018 with Smart Music. Check out their demonstration videos and testimonials on the Smart Music YouTube channel. They truly care about music educators, which is why they sponsor and promote this podcast. This episode is also sponsored by something you're going to be hearing a lot about, the International Music Education Summit. Find out more about how you can attend this virtual, online, live in-service event at musicedsummit.com. We're going to start with some brief introductions this episode, then jump into the questions. Oh, and before I forget, you will hear some tips for those of you who aren't interested in changing jobs, but are thinking about continuing your education. So be sure to listen for those. There is something for everybody this episode. So let's begin.
My name is Elizabeth Caldwell. I teach kindergarten through 6th grade general music and choir in Connecticut. And I've been teaching elementary general music and choir for about 11 or 12 years now. And I've taught this is my 4th school.
I'm Carolyn Dorman, and I have taught in the state of Colorado for 30 years.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jolie DeVries.
And tell us about yourself.
Okay. And I teach music. I've been teaching for 13 years. I'm in Evansville, Indiana. And I teach general vocal music. And I've had choirs. And I also am a violin player and a guitar player. So I don't play piano, which is one of the taboos of being a music teacher. But I find my way around it pretty easily.
My name is Vince Caruso, and I teach high school band at Shorecrest High School in Shoreline, Washington, which is actually basically just North Seattle. And this is my 8th year at this particular school. It's my 23rd year as a band director. And over those 23 years, have taught anywhere from 5th grade band all the way through high school band.
Okay, my name is Carrie Adams, and I have taught mostly middle school for most of my career. I taught 6 years of middle school general music and middle school choir. in Knob Noster, Missouri, where Whiteman Air Force Base is. So it was a really unique, but I was in the course of my time there, I went from about 12 kids in the program to a little over 80 when I left. So it was really fun to see that program grow. While I was in that area, I did my master's in choral conducting at the University of Central Missouri. And this semester, I just started my PhD in music education at the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas.
The first question I asked our panel of experts here was, if I'm a new teacher, what are the top skills I need to have for my first job? And here's what they said.
Absolutely organizational skills. You need to be able to manage your time, which means planning your lesson time, because you have a limited amount of time with those kids. And you just need to make the most of it by having some kind of an introduction to whatever the idea is for the day, the lesson itself, and then a review at the end. And you need to be able to organize your lesson plans. You need to organize your room and your materials. So I think that will help you be successful. Then you need to have people skills. You got to work well with your fellow staff members and your secretary and your custodian and students and the parents. Well, a lot of it, basically on your resume, I think, of course, you list your degrees and any extra classwork that you've taken to improve your teaching skills, experiences in music or any other area that helps you become a better teacher, any awards or acknowledgments that you've received, goals that you have for yourself, your career, students, and your future. I mean, they want to know that you're looking ahead at things. And skills that you have that have made you a strong teacher.
I think there are 3 main areas that you want to have some understanding of and some experience with, that, and to the point that you can, know where you are at least, so that you can develop those skills, even if you're not all the way there when you first start. And that's behavior management, long range planning, and kind of an understanding of when to teach what, and then teaching skills, so pedagogy. So I hesitate to say that you need to have, certain skills going into it, because I know some people start off with very little skill or background for one reason or another, and then they're able to develop those skills. But I think it's important. I think you have to go into your first year of teaching with at least an understanding that those things are important. And if you don't have those skills already, I think you need to be aware enough to be able to find a mentor or somebody like that who can really help you work on those skills in your first year of teaching, so that you can develop in those areas. Because without behavior management, you're not going to get any teaching done. And without an idea of what to teach when sequentially, you're going to just struggle with lesson planning all year. It's going to be the bane of your existence. And, nothing's going to be sequenced in a way that your students can really develop their skills and understanding. And without an understanding of just basic teaching, pedagogical technique, it doesn't matter how much content knowledge you have, you're not going to be able to communicate that to your students.
Well, I would say classroom management is, if not one of the most important things. I found that nothing in school, in college, prepared me for classroom management. I still, I'm not an expert by any means, but I think being aware of it, having some strategies, having, some backup plans, reading some books beforehand it would be really beneficial for a new teacher.
I think the biggest thing is organization. I think some people would tell you that that's a genetic thing, that you're just kind of born with being organized. And other people would swear that it's not, that it can be learned. I think I'm pretty fortunate that I consider myself a pretty organized person. And I don't know where that skill came from, but I think that's huge as a beginning teacher, to make sure that you are have all your ducks in a row, whether it's paperwork or communicating with families and students, administrators, just making sure that everybody knows what's going on and has a clear picture of what to expect and what's coming next around the corner. As far as instructional skills, I think it's real easy to get hung up on if you're a woodwind player or a brass player or a percussion player, but ultimately you have to be kind of the expert in the room. And I know some people really believe that you need to be able to play every instrument proficiently. I wish I could say I played every instrument proficiently. I'm a brass player. I play trombone. But I think it's important that when you're first starting out, that you do the best you can to learn as much as you can about the instruments. And if you're able to play along with the kids, like at an elementary level or middle school level, that's great. But if not, I think there are lots of brass pedagogical things that can be applied to woodwinds and vice versa. But the sooner you can really grab those pedagogical differences and similarities and be able to communicate to your students is really important. So I'd say those two things, the communication and then just the individual instrument pedagogy.
I feel like some of the most important things that you can have under your belt whenever you're entering the field, first of all, is an organization system and a time management system that works for you. There are tons of different options that people will promote, but you just need to find something that is going to be sustainable for your personality and for your lifestyle. So I think that's very important going into your first job. I also feel like for teachers in general, some of the things that skills that we need to have are, first of all, we need to be highly reflective people. We need to be able to look back on our lessons and on things that we've done and think about what were the things that I did really well, what are the areas where I have to grow still. To be able to reflect back on those things, I think is so important. Along with that, a willingness to constantly grow. I feel like we should have an understanding of what our strengths are, but we also need to be aware of where our weaknesses are and look at those as opportunities for us to continue to grow. I feel like teachers also need to be very purposeful, especially when you're going in those first couple of years. Think very clearly about what kind of culture you want to have in your classroom. What are the things that are really important to you? What experiences do you want your students to have? How do you want them to feel as part of your class? Have as clear of an idea in your head of what that's going to look like as you can, and then be purposeful in everything that you're doing to make sure that you are accomplishing those goals. And then lastly, I feel like we need to be in touch with our passion about our subject area, about education, about our students, understand what is your why for being in the classroom and stay connected with that in all that you do. I think if we have those skills together, then you're going to be able to find success even in that first couple of years.
Next, I asked them, what is the best way to find a new job to apply for in the first place? And they responded.
So the first 3 jobs that I had, I knew people at the school or I knew someone who knew someone. So one great way is to find those schools where you do know people, even if it's through a university professor or, someone who's friends with your parents or whatever it may be. Find those connections and just put your name out there.
By knowing other people, especially if you're a small district, by knowing other music teachers in other areas. If you have a chance to join an organization, and we had one, it met up in Glenwood Spring, so we got to know other music teachers around, and that way you could find out what was going on. And that is really important, even without the internet.
Usually people tend to, I think, err on the side of not emailing and not contacting people enough, in the sense of keeping your name on the forefront of people's minds. You don't want to be obnoxious, but following up with things, asking questions about the school and about the job. I think all of those things come off as just communicating that you're genuinely interested in the position, have enough expertise to know what questions to ask. I think all of those things actually end up working to my advantage. The only other thing I think that was helpful was I had an online portfolio, which was really just a blog website, which I had never set up before, but I just got a free blog through Blogger. And I uploaded all of my letters of recommendation. The nice thing about the online portfolio was that I was also able to upload a bunch of photos and videos of some of my previous classrooms and of student work and, concert performances. Obviously you have to be careful if you're showing students about making sure that you have permission to share those. But I had it on a private website and I had permission for the ones that I was showing. So if you can do that, that was really awesome. That was something else that I wasn't ever really sure if people were looking at, but I had several interviewers comment and say how, impressed they were to see my concert performances, or they would reference pictures that they had seen. And I think that really helps them kind of picture you teaching and see you in that position.
I would say talk to people. Recommendations are probably the biggest thing. For me, I wasn't looking to switch schools. I just knew that I needed a change, and I had kind of been like putting feelers out there. And I just think it was, I don't know if it was, it was meant to be. I don't know how to explain it, but one of my friends just kept recommending, there's an opening, there's an opening. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll tell so-and-so about it. And I didn't think about it for myself until finally I was just like, boom, stupid, you need to call this person, So it was a really big awakening, just that people, recommend from friends or colleagues or people you've worked with. And I think you can use your resources to find people in your community probably and if you're new starting out, college professors, recommendations, if you're staying in the same town that you went to school at, the places you student taught, meet people. One of the things I noticed when I was in my other school, student teachers would come through and they weren't networking, and they weren't friendly to the music lady who stands in the hallway every day, who sees and knows everything. They didn't know to say, hey, how are you? Because later those are the people who might hear of a job and might think, oh, I like that nice second grade student teacher I met. I'm going to give her a recommendation, So I think using people and meeting people and never underestimating the power of just who you might know.
That's a great question. I have to say I've been pretty fortunate. I've pretty much every job that I've gotten have been through people I knew, whether that was coming right out of college or the couple of times when I left Colorado and moved to Washington. Really, it was through people that I knew, and those connections are really important. So it's important that when you're a college student, I think that you get out and meet other band directors and see their programs and at least kind of get your name out there, whether that means if you're formally working with programs in the community to help out for free, that's important. But I really do think it's about connections and kind of getting your name out there.
The second question was, what is the best way to find a new job? But you wanted to talk a little bit about, how to move on with your education, whether it's a master's degree or a doctorate. Give us some support on that.
Okay, sure. I think especially when we're looking at graduate work, the application, you need to be very, very aware of what your timeline is for applications. So a lot of the applications are due around December. So you want to be aware of what you're going to have to submit on those applications and start preparing for that really early. In my experience applying for doctoral programs, some of the things that the schools wanted were a resume or a CV, transcripts, test scores, all those things that you would expect. They also want a writing sample. So if you are applying for a doctoral program, if you had a paper that you did as part of your master's work. That would work for your writing sample. They're also going to want a philosophy statement, and they're going to want teaching videos. And the teaching videos for me were the most time intensive part of that application. So I would recommend picking a class and record everything that happens in that class for a whole semester or for a whole year. I heard that advice and I thought it seemed excessive. And then I did it. And I looked back over this whole semester worth of footage that I had, and all these moments that I had thought at the time were just so wonderful. And then when I started to edit and think about what I was actually going to send in, it started to quickly narrow down into maybe 10 or 15 minutes that I felt like I actually was what I wanted to submit. So have lots and lots of footage available that you can go through and edit and decide what's going to show the best aspects of your teaching. Looking at that timeline, I would say if you're wanting to go into doctoral work and the application, you want to start your materials a full 2 school years before you're actually wanting to enroll. So if I'm looking ahead, I'm going to think, well, I'm going to go ahead and record everything I do for the rest of this school year. Then next fall, I can start on my application, have it in by December, and then that would get me to enroll the following year. So just be aware of what that timeline is.
Wow,
and
that's also really impressive, actually.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And then also be aware of what the kind of testing they have. So a lot of programs have placement exams that you have to go through. Some of them are after you're accepted, so that's not that big of a deal. If you have an issue on a placement exam, you can just take some remediation coursework to get you to the point. But some other programs actually have you go through the testing before you're accepted into the program, and that's kind of their last way to narrow down in their search for candidates. So be aware of what those requirements are going to be based on where you're applying as well.
So once we find that new job to apply for, what are the most important things to have on our resume to make sure that we can get that job? Here's what they said.
Well, a lot of it, basically on your resume, I think, of course, you list your degrees and any extra classwork that you've taken to improve your teaching skills, experiences in music or any other area that helps you become a better teacher, any awards or acknowledgments that you've received, goals that you have for yourself, your career, students, and your future. I mean, they want to know that you're looking ahead at things, and skills that you have that have made you a strong teacher. So those are the kind of things that I think are really important on a resume. And to
I think, again, I mentioned earlier, I think the more you can get out and work in schools with students, in addition to student teaching. So if you're a college student and you're looking to, you're planning ahead and you've got your act together and you know you're going to be student teaching, I think even before that, you want to be getting out into local middle school and high schools or elementary schools and asking if you can help. Can you either, if they don't want your help, then can you just come observe? And it doesn't matter if it's band, choir, orchestra, general music, any of that. I think the more you can be visible in the classroom, and I think that's the kind of thing you can easily put on your resume, is I spent X number of hours observing, on my own, outside of my university expectations. And even better would be actual time spent with students, helping them get better. And if you can get any sort of recommendations from those teachers that you've helped or worked with, that's even better. But I think that real world experience makes a big difference.
I think that most important on your resume or your CV, it's to make sure that everything that you have on there is relevant to the job that you're applying for. And so that may mean that you're not necessarily using the same resume and the same CV for everything. When I started, I was looking at choral jobs and I was also looking at elementary jobs. And so I actually had 2 different resumes that I would use based on which job I was applying for. They both had basically the same information on them, but they were formatted in a way so that one of them highlighted more my elementary work and one of them highlighted more my choral work. But make sure that you're sending in something that's applicable to whatever job you're applying for. I would say early in your career to be careful of resume padding. We all do that a little bit, and a little bit is okay. But when we have extensive resume padding, especially in the first couple of years, a lot of times that can read to your employer like you're underqualified and you're trying to make it look like you're not, or that you're very desperate for a job. And sometimes that can discount in your future employer's eyes your resume. So make sure that it is all it's applicable to what you're doing, and it's highlighting what you want it to highlight, and that it's not it's succinct in your writing and not excessive in your padding of the resume. So as far as a portfolio or other materials to have, I think those are always helpful to have. I've been in interviews before where people brought in DVDs or links to videos of them teaching, but be aware that in some places when they're hiring, they are not allowed to view those things due to laws that govern to make sure that everyone goes through the exact same process. Some districts are, even if you have those things, they won't actually be able to take them into consideration. But when you're looking at higher ed jobs, then you're definitely going to want to have those things ready.
So once we get our ideal job, we've totally clinched it. What are the first things we need to do when starting at a new school or a new job?
First of all, make certain that you understand the expectations for your program. How many performances do they expect? What are they grading? Because that was one of the things that just would get tricky. You know, how do they expect you to grade music students? Because grading music is so subjective, you know. Then you need to absolutely connect with the building secretary and custodian. They will be your best friends. If you work it right, you need that secretary for more things than you'll ever know. And the custodian, well, without his help, you'll be hauling stuff down to the cafeteria like I did the last few years. And then the staff. And the staff is just great for, especially the teachers, so that you can get to know the students and converse with them when you're having a problem or when they're having a problem.
I think anytime you can get in touch with the previous music teacher, that's always a good thing. Even if the previous music teacher had a bad experience, I think it's important to know that going in if you can, and try to spin it in a positive way for yourself, but at least go in informed. But especially if they are not leaving on bad terms, you can get so much valuable inside information from them. Like, what are those performances that are kind of expected but aren't really officially on the calendar? There's often these, oh, by the way, next week there's going to be an assembly and nobody ever told you kinds of things that come up anytime you come into a new job. So those things, if you can talk to the previous music teacher, they'll be the most aware. But if not, I always try to sit down with the principal before school, before classes start, if I can, and just go through the year and say, are there any things in which you are expecting some kind of musical contribution? When I first started teaching, I would just ask, when are the concerts? And that was an easy answer. But then most administrators and non-music teachers don't think of all these other extra things as, quote, concerts. And so it doesn't come up in that kind of a question. So I find going through the whole calendar and asking someone what events are happening that will require musical contributions helps to kind of bring out some of those other side things so that you're not surprised by something like that. The other thing that I honestly focus on the most when I'm starting in a new job is learning the students' names. I tell my coworkers and administrators and everybody else, I'm really sorry, but I am using every ounce of my brain to learn these hundreds of student names, and that's my priority right now. So if I forget your name, I apologize. but that's not my priority yet.
Well, first, set up your classroom. Decide which way, which way you want the kids to face. If you're going to be using the stereo a lot, are you going to have to turn your back to the kids to turn it on every time, or climb over your desk to get to your mouse on your computer? Little things like that make a huge difference. I have a friend who said, get a wireless mouse. And I was like, oh, that's such a great idea, because I had a smart board before and now I don't. And so I was literally climbing over my desk to get to the mouse, and I was like, this is not working. And so I have a wireless mouse now, and I can move it anywhere. It's great. So setting up a classroom, if you're going to have a classroom management plan, I would say start it from day one. You can always add to it, but you might start something simple like, happy faces on the board, or everybody's going to try to earn some points as a whole, or something like that. But make it fun. Maybe make it a contest. I think it helps from day one to have some sort of plan for classroom management.
I've done this a couple of times, taken over programs. Most recently, it was a very healthy program, was doing really good things. Prior to that, had fallen on a little bit of hard times, had a great tradition, but had a couple of rough years. And then another time in Colorado where, teacher had been there for a very long time, but expectations had kind of fallen off and things had really kind of gone downhill. And each of those has different challenges, but what I did in each of those cases was I got in there as soon as I could, like physically got in the building. I got keys as soon as I could. And I went through the music libraries and started looking through what was in there, tried to find old programs, or even just ask the previous teacher what kind of things they had played in the past. But I really wanted to know the library in and out. I wanted to know what method book they used. All those kind of things kind of help paint a picture of what it is the kids can or can't do. If there are old recordings around, a year or 2, 3 year old recordings of the groups, those are really useful. YouTube is so easily accessed now. Most bands probably have some sort of digital footprint in that way for you to look up. And then it was really important for me in those summers to get in there and just meet the office staff and connect with those people and introduce myself. And I think you can make a pretty big impression to be there before school starts and really get the room set up the way you want it, and just start making connections with people face to face.
So maybe we've already been at this job for a while. How do we know if it's time to change jobs, retire, or get out of music education altogether? This was a tough question, but here's what they said.
Well, I had a trumpet teacher at Western that told us in our music methods class, he said, if you're not dedicated to teaching music 110%, then get out of it and go sell insurance. And I've always believed that. I've always felt that way, because it's your enthusiasm that makes or breaks the classroom. And of course, there were days when I loved my job so much, I would actually literally dance across the classroom thinking how lucky I was to be having a job like this that I enjoyed so much. And I did. I truly enjoyed it for, I would say, like 29 and a half years, because it was just a joy every day to share what I loved with my students. And so if you don't have that lack of enthusiasm for the coming day, then you need to think about it. Do you still want to teach? Do you feel like maybe you've gone as far as you can in that job or with that program, and maybe you need a change? Because I've heard philosophies that you should change jobs every 7 years to keep yourself fresh. And there have been principals that I've known that would make the elementary teachers switch classrooms every few years because he thought it made them fresher because they had to redo everything. And it is, and maybe that's what helped me stay in love with teaching music, because I did the first job for 3.5. I did the next job for about 4, and then the rest was general music. And because I had that change, maybe it kept me fresher, but also I know that getting the further education of the orchestra absolutely kept me in general music and loving it. So I think that, and sometimes life changes the job for you. I mean, like I got married and I really didn't want to commute anymore, and I kind of wanted to move down here. So sometimes they don't always, not always quite your choice, but you learn to work with it.
When your life circumstances change and the job that you have just isn't a good fit anymore, it was really hard for me to leave that first school because, like I said, it was a brand new school. I was the first music teacher. I was fresh out of college. I was gung-ho. I wrote the entire general music curriculum. I still think it was the right decision, because if I had decided to stay because I wanted to stay with those kids or that program and had put that strain on myself and my family to have that, 2-hour commute, juggling all these other things outside of school, it would have really hurt my ability to succeed as a teacher as well. And I would have been doing a disservice to the students and to the school too.
Gosh, I was on that front this summer. I just got my administrative license because I've been so frustrated. I didn't feel like I guess the typical, underappreciated and overworked and I didn't feel like I was doing well in my environment because I had so many obstacles. It was like, every time you turn, there's a new, school-wide behavior thing that you have to comply to, or they put you on as the leader of that committee and everybody hates you because of it. That really happened. But so then, you have to deal with that. But I was just really burnt out and I really just wanted to change. And so I got my administrative license, not really knowing if I wanted to be a principal or not, but not really ruling it out, that I just love, the whole school environment. But my passion has always been music. And I was also a theater person in college. And, just performing is like my life. And I can't not do it. So when this opportunity arose and I moved to a different school, I was like, I can't believe, how much I'm enjoying teaching music again. I'm actually feeling like I'm teaching and not just fighting with kids all day. And I don't know if it's just the change in environment or, new people, new faces, but I think it's all of it. I feel like, your administration sets the tone for your school, and good or bad, that can make a big difference in your life.
We all have those days where you're like, oh my God, how am I going to do this for another 20 years? But in general, I've actually never really seriously considered, bailing out of music education. So I can't really speak from experience on that one. I've changed jobs a couple of times. One time when I left Colorado, there weren't really any jobs in Colorado that I was really interested in. I was personally, on an individual level, just really ready for change, which is why I threw all my stuff in a truck and moved to Seattle. So, so there's lots of different reasons for wanting change. I think sometimes you feel like maybe you've taken the program as far as you can take it, and maybe they're ready for a new challenge. Maybe sometimes you're ready for a new challenge. I think that's what drove me to this current job. Was I was perfectly happy in my previous school, but the thought of a new challenge and having to learn some different things was really enticing. So I think you really have to be introspective and kind of know yourself. And, there's a lot to be said too for sticking around and really making something your own. It's real easy to kind of spend 4 or 5 years somewhere and then go somewhere else and spend another 4 or 5 years somewhere and go somewhere else. There's a lot to be said, I think, for longevity and really putting your name on a program. But that's a real hard and personal decision, whether it's changing jobs or retiring or getting out of the business at all. I've got a long way to go before I can even think about retiring. So that really hasn't even crossed my mind yet.
Right. For me, the way that I describe this decision that I made to move out of public school teaching and into my doctorate, and with the goal of working in higher ed, for me, it was a sense of positive restlessness. So it was not, I'm unhappy or I'm dissatisfied or I don't want to teach public school anymore. In fact, leaving the classroom was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I absolutely loved my job. I had the best job in the world. And sometimes I wonder if I was crazy for leaving it. But at the same time, I saw things happening in the world of education. I saw things happening in teachers who were entering and then leaving that really bothered me, in that I felt like I had something valuable that I could add to the conversation and to the research going forward that could help change that, so that we have more teachers going into the field who have long and healthy and joyful careers. In spite of this love that I had for the position I was in, I felt like what I had to offer was important, and that I needed to move into a position where I could do that.
Finally, out of curiosity, I had to ask each one, if you didn't teach music, what would you teach? Here's how they responded, and you might be surprised.
I would teach elementary school homeroom, I think. I love working with this age. Probably I would want to do like somewhere between kindergarten and fourth grade. Once they start getting up to fifth grade, they start to annoy me a little bit more. But yeah, I love working with little kids.
I love English and I love history. So probably one of those.
Gosh, I would probably teach English. And one thing I do is I teach English as a second language. And I do that online right now. And I have just grown to love those kids. The ESL students are so excited to learn, and they are, just so much fun. So I think that I would probably try to teach English or ESL if I didn't teach music.
Yeah, I don't know. I can remember even as a middle school student thinking that being a teacher would be cool. And I don't know where I got that notion. I mean, I always liked school, for the most part, enjoyed school, was a decent student. And I just always thought that would be a neat profession. I think had I not become a band director, I know at the time anyway, as a high school student, a middle school student, I thought teaching English would be fun. And I don't really know where I got that. I'm actually really glad I don't teach English now.
Well, okay, maybe this is cheating, but I am most passionate about education. So if I wasn't teaching music, I would still want to teach teaching. So I have an opportunity this semester to teach a course that's for elementary education majors, and it's on music, but it's for elementary majors. And in the course of this, teaching this, I've been thinking, if I wasn't able to get a music position somewhere, if the only position I could get was teaching just straight education classes, I would still be happy doing that. I'm so passionate about educational psychology, about curriculum design, about integrating curriculum areas, about tests and measurements. And I would be so happy if I could just teach teaching still.
The final question I asked our panelists here was this: what do you think is more important, passion for music or passion for kids?
That's a hard one, because you have to love the subject. But if you don't have a love for kids, then will you have the patience to teach it? But I never wanted to play professionally. I would get too incredibly nervous. And I just thought that I wanted to share what I loved about it. So maybe it is the kids that you need to love more, because you have to be a people person to relate to kids. That has to be it. They have to be the main focus. So I'd say maybe kids.
Kids. I will always say kids. When I was in my music education degree program, my undergraduate program, I was the only one who saw myself as a teacher first and a musician second. Everyone else in the music education program in my conservatory saw themselves as musicians first and teachers second.
That's tough. I would say like 40% kids and 60% music. And I'll tell you why, because you have to, a little bit fight for music to be important, because it's not always to everyone. And it's, being a general, special subject, you're looked at as sort of a glorified babysitter about half the time. But I think it's also about the kids, because you really have to relate to the kids, and we see them over years and not just 1 year at a time. So we really grow a relationship with them over time. The kids that are in my daughter's class at the high school, I see them now, and I had them when they were babies. And I'm just like the little old lady in the audience tearing up when I see that percussion kid that was a handful, and he's over there rocking it now in 8th grade. And, that's why I love my job. That makes me really feel proud, to do what I do.
Yeah, I think you have to really like kids first and foremost. I just think if you really like kids and you're enthusiastic and you care about them, and you care about not only them improving their musical skills, but also them as people, as individuals, not just a group of people that you stand in front of every day. I think that's your best way to get to the passion for music.
I believe wholeheartedly that the most important thing is our passion for students. Our music is the medium that we use to educate and to reach our students, but our students have to be the primary focus in everything that we're doing. And everything that I do in the classroom, the first question I always ask myself is this what is best for my students? Period. And it does not matter. What we're doing musically absolutely matters, and we want to achieve the best product that we can, and we want to achieve good musicianship, but that can never overshadow the decisions that we make for our students. They always have to come first in everything we do.
So whether you love your job or are thinking of a change, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It can be hard at the end of the Christmas season when you're just thinking maybe you're a little burned out and you're looking at the next year. So I hope that this episode has helped give you some encouragement and some clarity. It was such a pleasure for me to get to know these fine educators, and I loved hearing all of their advice, both when they corroborated and contradicted each other. In the end, your best bet in my mind is to find a mentor who can help guide you. These interviews were so valuable, and I obviously had to cut out a lot of the material. So make sure you get over to professionalmusiceducator.com/podcast. And if you aren't already on my email list, scroll down to the bottom and join it so that when I do post the full unedited interviews, if I decide to do that, then you can get access to them. All right. So while you're at it, it would absolutely make my year if you would share this podcast with 5 like-minded music educators. The greater our reach, the more people we can help. Really, it'll make you like a superhero. Remember, it's easy to follow, like, share, and rate us. That's how we'll get found as well. If you have some free time over the holidays, why not peruse the Smart Music blog? You might discover something that will make a huge difference in your classroom and your life. While you're at it, check out musicedsummit.com and learn more about this upcoming opportunity. Until next time, keep teaching on.